Okay, we are live. I'm going to shut that down. Hello, 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 everyone. Just give me a moment to get my technology. You know how I am here. Lovely technology. I am going to hit record next. And where's the button for that? Where is the button? More. Here it is. It was hiding. Record. Okay, hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to the You Talk over here on the You Movement. Tonight we have a very special guest that I'm like crazily excited about. We have Tyler Miller tonight. Now, I met Tyler a while back through Facebook, and what I'm most excited about is tonight we're getting kind of an awakening perspective through the eyes of a masculine, because we've had women all through this. So guys, if you're out there and want to hop on to You Talk and give your perspective on what it is you're going through, we all want to know. We all want to know. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Tyler, and you can just give us a little bit of a synopsis about who you are and who you were before your awakening. Tyler, take it over.
So, who I was before my awakening, my name is Tyler. I was born Barton Tyler Miller is my full name, and that plays a role because names are very important to me. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, a not very good Jewish boy who got into a lot of trouble. Raised Jewish in a conservative Jewish synagogue until my dad passed away at 15. And lately, I'm going to jump around here. I have been navigating some of my identity as an orphan because at the time my father died, my mom, who really relied on my dad, really kind of went off the deep end. No disrespect to her, but her life crumbled around her. She became a single mom overnight. It was completely unexpected. She was raising two boys, and the neglect just came because she couldn't take care of herself, let alone us. So in a sense, I was orphaned at 15, and really tried to have to figure all of it out on my own. I became disenfranchised with being Jewish at the time. My mom and I got into struggles and ended up at a Quaker boarding school for my junior and senior year of high school. Um, and there's a story there, but we won't get into that. So I went to a Quaker boarding school that really, for me, was an oasis that I didn't appreciate or recognize at the time. I hated it. I was miserable. I was angry. I was all sorts of stuff. I wanted to run as far away as I could. So I ran to California, went to college at UC Santa Barbara, was basically, for lack of a better word, atheist, and really struggled to figure out who I was. I just kept running and running and running. I so that's kind of who I was before the awakening. I have gone through now 3 awakenings. This is now my third process. I'm not done by any means. The first awakening was I for a period of time basically became a born again Christian. Had what I would say is a real encounter with Jesus, with Yeshua, whatever you want to call him. I see him as an ascended master who came to enlighten and teach us. And so that began my first journey of awakening. I ended up marrying my mother, not reality, like not my real mother, but I married somebody who was an analog for my mother, to the point they both had the same middle name, which was a weird coincidence. I basically chose her because it was easy. I didn't have to do any more growing. I felt I was done and I had arrived. So that first spiritual journey really came to an end when I got married. And I was stagnant for probably 19 years. Had 6 kids in the middle of all of that. Yes, I have 6 kids.
Wow.
The youngest is 6, the oldest is 17. They were all born girls. I have a trans son, though. And so we're going to talk a lot, I think, today about masculinity and femininity and how those all play a role. My second spiritual awakening really began when I had a heart attack in 2016. I was about 300 pounds. I was just trying to just survive. And really, that kind of woke me up emotionally because I had gone my whole life avoiding emotions. I'd gone my whole life avoiding hugs and things like that. And I really started a journey reconnecting with Judaism. And so I started attending a synagogue in Santa Barbara, California. I started really connecting with, Orthodox. It was Orthodox Jews at the time, who were very spiritual. It was a very different experience for me. My marriage. So when we moved to New York in 2018 in December, and then when COVID hit, my marriage, it kind of it sped up the process for my marriage ending. And so when my marriage ended, I really began this third spiritual awakening, to where I deeply connected with who I was as a Jew. I started going down the road of working with energies, to where today I am. So I do now a lot of spiritual coaching. I do dream interpretation. I'm a Reiki Master Practitioner. I do a lot of work on teaching on masculine and feminine energies. I am familiar with Kabbalah. I am familiar with Tibetan Tantra, which was probably one of the first frameworks I found. I had a really good friend from high school who introduced me to this amazing book called The Rainbow of Liberated Energy that was all about the energy color rainbow within Tibetan Tantra, which was beautiful. And so I work a lot with energy these days. And so that kind of is the short version of who I am and where I am today.
That's very interesting. Yes, I do want to dive into your perspective of masculine and feminine energies. Like first, like wow, can I just say wow? Because 6 kids, that's a lot in itself. That would put me through an awakening. But I'm seeing how a lot of your information that you're giving to us was spaced out. Like you describe it as 3 awakenings, whereas I kind of see that I've had 2 in my life, but everything was kind of squeezed all together for me really quickly. So it might have been a little bit more, would you describe it easier to handle when it was split into 3, or was each 3 as brutal as the last?
I would say it flows, right? Like, so to me, it's almost like the moon cycle, like a woman's cycle. There are ebbs and flows throughout. I am very oriented to the moon cycle within Kabbalah, within Judaism, the new moon, the full moon, and when the full moon hits, if there are shadows that you need to unpack, that is going to be painful. If you are doing the work, the full light is going to bring joy to the light of the work you're doing. And I think we for a long time for me, I just thought I was going to be done. Like at some point it was going to be over. I'm done my journey. It's time to move on. One of the biggest issues in my marriage is I thought after my first awakening, which was before I met my ex-wife, I had told her I had healed a lot of my childhood wounds. Boy, was I wrong. She interpreted it as I was lying to her, but that's her perspective and that's her reality, and she's entitled to it. But for me, what I've discovered is we will never be done. And that can be disheartening and hopeful all at the same time. So the pain is never going to stop because neither is the joy. And so to me, in Judaism and Kabbalah, one of the main principles that I've learned is this idea of a check mark, right? Like you have a check mark. and you've got to go down to go up. And it's always this process of down and up. And we so often judge, I'm going backwards, I'm going down, I'm going in the wrong direction. I want to go there, but I'm going this way. And that feels wrong. And there's something I don't like about it. When in reality, we're going this way because this is the way we need to go to change course and go this way, and then this way, and this way. And I went from, I looked at life as a Jenga game. And a friend of mine had this conversation. I would always just push on the pieces. And if they were easy to push, that's the move I'd make. Well, my friend's like, Tyler, life isn't a Jenga game. It's a labyrinth. And we argued about it, but she was right. The idea that this is a labyrinth and that we know where we want to go. We get disoriented because we're not going in the direction we, in our human brains, think we should go. Well, spoiler alert, the universe, our higher selves, God, whatever framework you want to use, knows better than we do where we need to go. And that is a hard thing to accept when you have $100 in your bank account, your rent is due in a week, and you don't see a way to make this work. That is a hard place. And anyone going through divorce who lived a comfortable life understands that reality. And yet, everything always worked out. And everything has always worked out the way it should. What has helped me along the way is weekly therapy. I have found the most amazing therapist who I can share everything with. And he and I talk every week. I graduated a month ago. So I graduated in a meeting with him every 2 weeks. He's like, I think we're okay, Tyler, to meet every 2 weeks. Let's see how that goes. It was a little nerve-wracking for me, but weekly therapy was a big deal. Daily journaling. So from August 15th, 2020, which is really when this third spiritual awakening started, I can go back to any day of my life and see, because I keep it all on my phone. I have a Word document. I can go back and see what was going on that day.
That's amazing. Yeah, I like that you've shared with us two tools that have worked for you. That's really important. Absolutely. I love the imagery of the check mark because in the going down, you raise double the height. Right? A check mark is like, yeah, it feels like failure because you're going down a small amount, but then you propel out double what you went down. You know, you're not coming back up to the same of where you were. You're going beyond that. So I love that imagery. That's fantastic imagery, indeed.
And let me add to that, because somebody gave me something else to that. It's a slingshot.
Yes.
It's this pulling back, and it gets released, and you launch to the next plateau.
I love that. I love that. So let's go more into this whole feminine and masculine energies, because from your perspective, who were you before? Because we're talking before and after in relation to the idea of feminine and masculine energies. Give me a little bit of a comparison.
So growing up, and your father dies when you're 15 as a boy, right? Like it does something. There is a loss, because I've learned in reading books and therapy and all of this, my mom bestowed upon me masculinity when I was born. I got my masculine identity from my mother's womb. So when I was born, she did her work to bestow upon me this idea of being a boy, a man. The masculine side of me, so the feminine had affirmed me as a man. But I never got this affirmation from my dad of that same masculinity. And my entire childhood, I felt like a pariah in my own body because my mom, who bestowed masculinity on me, rejected me. She neglected me. She let me fend, and I'm Gen Xer, so we were latchkey kids. There was nobody home. I raised myself. And so this idea of being, quote unquote, a man, I had no clue what that meant. I could see on television. I had friends. I was on the football team. I got thrown into lockers and urinated on by the bigger guys. Like, that to me was masculinity. It was toxic. And I was joking actually a couple days ago about why men are so fragile and toxic. Well, our moms were treated poorly by our fathers. And so our mothers likely resented us as men. And so we grew up to be men who resented our mothers, and we don't treat women well. And women don't get treated well by men. So they kind of keep that toxic trauma going. And it's no one's fault, and it's the patriarchy's fault. And I will say that till I'm blue in the face, because there is some design here that is keeping men in power. And I knew as a boy and as a man, I didn't have that power. In high school, the guys who got all the women, because I knew I was attracted to women, and it confused me because I also thought maybe I was gay because I was more feminine. I tended to be the guy that the women loved talking about. The girls would always come to me and tell me about how toxic their boyfriends were. And it bothered me. And I'm sitting here going, what about me? I'm a good guy. And yes, I was. And I was not living in my masculine polarity. I was purely living in my feminine polarity. And that's what I got. I got what I attracted. And so who I was a very feminine man, boy, who didn't know what it meant to be masculine.
So does that mean that the women that you attracted and dated were in their masculine polarity?
I didn't date women until college and got into alcohol.
But would you still describe when you did start dating that the women that you dated would have been in their wounded masculine energy?
I would argue most of us are in our wounded energies, masculine or feminine or otherwise.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
Yes, I was not the lumberjack man who had the woman who was like, rescue me, the damsel in distress. That was not, I wanted to be the Superman to Lois Lane. That's what I wanted. But I also knew in the back of my mind that wasn't who I was. I didn't believe in myself enough. I thought I was a piece of trash and a piece of garbage. So no Lois Lane would ever want me. And so if I attracted somebody, they were just toxic. And I wasn't, they were just non-playable characters in my world. They weren't real to me. They weren't human. They were just a means to an end because the masculine wound centers around the womb. So a lot of reasons I believe men are so traumatized when it comes to sex is because the only place we feel safe is in a woman's womb. And we will do anything in our power to get there. If we hated our moms, we're going to lie and get over on her by messing with a woman to get to that safe place. If we didn't feel seen or loved, we're going to beg. We are going to bend over backwards in hopes that a woman would let us into her womb because we feel safe there. And when we're gone, we feel betrayed because after we leave, that feeling goes away. And we're like, what just happened? So you want to understand the mind of boys and men. What it is that womb is where we want to be. There is something inside of us that is driving us there. And
so you kind of say the last time you felt safe was in the womb.
Mm,
From the time of birth,
I
a
never
man is
felt it.
feeling not safe.
Not until 4 years ago. So I lived 48 years of my life never feeling safe. Never. Anxiety, and I didn't know this. Like, I didn't have the framework to talk about it. I didn't understand what was going on. I just knew I was not satisfied where I was. I was driven to go somewhere else because I kept looking for safety. I
in
ran,
in a woman.
well, yeah, I mean, for me, that's where it was. I wanted a girlfriend. I wanted somebody to love me because my mom certainly didn't. And nobody in my life seemed to care about me. I was on my own. I was an orphan, right? Like I literally had no family helping me from the age of about 15. And, and one of the biggest painful things about my marriage ending was her parents were my parents for 19 years. And losing them was a greater loss for me, honestly, than losing my wife. Because for me, as an orphan, and I've really embraced this identity lately because I'm letting it be healed by the mother, the divine mother, and the divine father. This idea of being an orphan, the womb was the last time on this earth I had felt safe before this last awakening. There were moments, like in my first awakening, I felt safe, but it was in my head. The second awakening, I felt safe, but it was more in my heart. This third awakening is my soul feels safe. I'm not looking to go anywhere else. And I am because I'm not fully healed, right? We're never fully. I have those moments where I go down and I revert back to feeling unsafe, especially with my kids. Because again, I mean, anybody with kids knows parent guilt, parent loneliness as a single parent failure and shame and guilt are so strong that you don't feel safe as a parent. And so for me, all I think humanity is looking for is moments of safety when it comes down to it. That's really what I think sex is in a lot of ways. It's connecting in a place of wanting to feel safe in connection for that moment, for that grasp of just feeling that sense of safety and power in that moment. And I think that to me is the journey we're all on in various capacities.
I'm loving what you're saying. And I do agree with you in so many ways that the whole element, I don't think that the world is safe for either masculines or feminines at the present moment in time. Neither really has power in patriarchy. However, there is an illusion of safety that both carry with them, with the illusory roles that both are playing in their woundedness. Within the masculine, though, because you're talking about one specific wounding, which is the neglected masculine,
Right.
is
So,
your wound. But there are other wounds within the masculine that I have observed in my life. For example, the golden boy. That kind of turns and grows into being a little bit of the fuck boy, that goes out and I'm just gonna do my whatever. And I'm sure there's more wounds, the abused boy, the demasculized boy. Do you see, from your vantage point, similar behaviors in each of these woundings, or do you see them manifesting differently?
so it's a great question. And I think it comes down to there's multiple layers, but I see all of those wounds manifesting in two shadow forms in the masculine. And we teach this in our class, and it's taken. And I did not create this. This is not my thought. This is something I've read and can attribute it later. I don't remember. I have it. I just don't remember it's the draconian masculine shadow and the collapsed masculine shadow. So the golden boy becomes draconian. I'm going to do everything I can at all costs and not care who gets in my way. I'm just going to take, take, take. Whereas the collapsed masculine, he just wants to be seen and acknowledged. He's trying to get everything he wants to be noticed. He wants attention. Whereas the draconian is, I'm going to disassociate from others. I'm just going to get mine and become super absorbed and super selfish. The feminine wound is the rigidified feminine who is all about saying no to everything to keep us safe. And this is in me. I have a rigidified feminine in me that says no, that is very structured and rigid because that's how I create safety for myself within me. And the all-devouring feminine, which is just wanting to feel full. So the feminine wounding, in my opinion, is about safety and fullness. The masculine wound is being seen and accomplishing tasks and feeling accomplished and not feeling those things. And all of those wounds are playing inside of us, and all of those shadows are playing inside of us. And I believe we are designed to play and deal with those shadows for the purpose of producing beautiful gifts. Beautiful gifts. And so as a man, it's one of the biggest mind shifts for me is in order for me to feel more masculine, I had to deal with my wounded feminine. I had to deal with my wounded feminine.
So would you see then with any individual, regardless of their particular gender, they would have one of each of these wounds and one would play the dominant role. So within a man, he's going to have either one or the other of these masculine wounds. He is also going to have at play one or the other of the feminine wounds. And within those four characteristics, he's going to have one dominant.
See, and I don't know that I would see it that way because I'm not or, I'm and. I would say it's both and, not either or. I would say all of us navigate all of those things. I think in different circumstances, they become prominent. So, for example, and I work with people who at work deal with certain wounding and shadows that are different than their personal romantic relationships, that are different than the wounds that manifest themselves in their parenting relationships. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think we deal with all of them. And I think they all present themselves and manifest themselves when they need to for the purposes of healing. Because one of the biggest shifts for me on my journey was when I realized, because I believed my heart was broken, the universe kept breaking my heart. But when I shifted my beliefs with the help of my therapist and my spiritual coach, that my heart isn't broken. My heart has always been healing, and everything that comes into my world and my life is designed to heal my heart. My heart is not broken, it's perfect. And the more my heart heals, the more my healing heart heals others, because I'm a part of the collective. And if we're going to heal the collective trauma, it starts with us, which is why, like on my website, Tikkun Olam, my mantra is heal ourselves, heal the world. Because
I love that, which is very much in alignment with everything that I teach about you need to heal it within. And so as these different shadow elements of wounded masculine and wounded feminine energies come up and interplay, and I love how you're seeing it, that it could be any of those four faces at any time, depending on the situation and their people that you're around. How is it that one would be able to, or how have you, or what do you teach in regards to how people can recognize them at play in their own life?
Great question. And I think here's the heart of the matter. There's a great book by Dr. Jenny Bowen or Dr. Jenny Brown, called Growing Yourself Up. And she looks at family systems dynamics. And she talks about the biggest core wound that we all have is this, that we grew up with this victim villain mentality. And so how I've learned to navigate these shadows is to not see them as villains within me, because I do, because the biggest masculine wound, I think, is the question of whether I'm a monster or I'm a weakling. Because my mom and dad...
That's an extreme.
Right. But my mom treated me as if I was a monster. She was scared of me like I was a monster. She was afraid of me like I was a monster. Because I learned later, and she's no longer with us, she was molested by her father. She disclosed that. So, of course, I was going to be a villain and a monster, or a potential villain monster that she was trying and bending over backwards to heal me in a way where I wouldn't end up like her dad. And that's what she was living out through me. Not recognizing the impact and the messaging it was sending me, that I had the potential to be this horrible, awful monster. So I started believing within me that I had this villain. There's this villain living inside of me, and I just needed to keep him at bay. And the key manifester, and if anyone has seen the movie Wicked currently, it is my favorite movie. And no spoilers, but the core message is that if we label anger as wicked, then all of us are wicked, because we all experience anger. And as a man feeling anger, that was the inroad to being identified as a monster. So what I had to do was go within and be curious. That, to me, I write about this in my Torah commentary. I think the message of the Torah comes down to this. The freedom and liberation is moving consciously from judgment to curiosity. Can I be curious? What is the draconian in me wanting that he's not getting, that he's acting out in this way? What is he missing? What am I not giving him? What is that collapsed masculine wanting me to notice about him within? What is he wanting me to recognize and nurture and encourage and say, I see you. I see right now this person is treating us in a way that where I am choosing to sacrifice you so I could be the hero in their story. And I'm choosing because I want to be the hero in their story. And in order to be the hero in their story, I have to betray me and this piece of me. And so I've become my own villain to be their hero.
And so is that where the mask, the facade of Mr. Nice Guy comes?
Yes, because how can if I am not nice, I am a villain and a monster. It's the binary, right? And I think within my female friends, and I do this too, because my feminine sometimes reigns supreme, I play the victim and I play up the victim, because if I don't, then I must be the villain, because there's no middle ground. I don't want to believe I'm a villain, so I have to be the villain. So I have to be a victim. So the way I write the story, because I tell people this all the time, the past isn't real. What happened a month ago, a minute ago, is no longer reality. All it is data stored in our brains, memories. And how we store that memory determines our current reality. And so how I write the story, if I'm a victim, I stay in my victimness because it assures me I'm not the villain. Whereas if I look at it and say, I am neither victim nor villain, I just am. I am who I am in this 30 seconds between you and I in this moment. I'm me, and I'm perfect, and you're perfect, and this moment is perfect. But it gets jammed up when the story in my head falls back and says, oh, you just asked me a question that triggers something from my past. A good example of that is today I was meeting with a friend who's a smoker. And I'm okay with smokers, but this was chimney level smoking. And we sat down and I was having this visceral reaction. And at one point I had to stop myself and go, she is free to smoke if she wants. That's not about me. What was going on inside of me was this trigger because my mom smoked, and she smoked in the car with the windows closed when I had asthma. And the doctors told her not to do that. And she still did it. And I was wrestling with this. How could a mother do that to her child?
Yes,
And
you were
I was
experiencing an emotional flashback, and it's important. I'm glad you brought that story up because an emotional flashback isn't necessarily triggered by a conscious awareness. It can be something as subtle as smelling cigarette smoke or being in an environment where there's a sensory experience and people may not have the awareness. Like, did you have that awareness right away, or did it take time for you to figure out?
So I have trained myself through so meditation is another tool. And I know that triggers people, that word, because everybody hears that word meditation and they bring their own trauma and their own connection to what meditation is to the table there. But for me, it's more kind of connected to mindfulness. So when I said the path to freedom and liberation is moving from judgment to curiosity, this is a perfect example. Because in that moment, sitting at that table, I was in judgment. I was looking outward. I was judging the smoke. I was judging the feelings it was creating. This is bad. I don't like this. You're the villain. I'm the victim. But I stopped myself, and none of this was happening. Like, this person wasn't aware any of this was going on until I started dealing with, why am I feeling this way? What's really going on? Let me lean into this. What's going on in that subconscious? What is my body doing? How can I be curious about this moment? And taking away all of this stuff, I was able to get to it. So then I was able to share with my friend, hey, I just want to let you know what just happened. You smell like smoke. You are free to smoke. I am not judging you for that. But if you were sensing in me like this agitation, this is what was going on. It was bringing me back to sitting in the car with my mom, smoking cigarettes and smelling that exact smell. But
Thank you very much for sharing that processes. I do the same type of processes of internal auditing when there's a trigger. I teach over and over again, triggers are an opportunity for healing, and that's when we need to do all the questioning within to see what's happening in that moment. But I really want to back up a little bit because you were talking about how there's a disconnect between feeling like a monster. So therefore, I have to create a persona of a victim on top of that, which in a lot of scope, people could recognize as being covertly narcissistic and in nature. And so is there that question that ever went through your mind? Because, narcissism is a buzzword in the last 10, 15 years. Did you ever ask yourself the question, Jesus, am I a narcissist?
So it's funny. It's funny. It's come up. I sat in therapy with my therapist going back and forth. Because I was accused of being a narcissist. So I was in therapy and my ex-wife accused me of being a narcissist. And so for me, I was sitting there going, am I? And my therapist would be like, Tyler, I've known you for 2 years. You do a lot of self-reflection. You're not a narcissist. He's like, the fact that you're asking me, are you a narcissist, tells me you're not. And my response to him was, what if I'm such a good narcissist? I know that by asking you that, you're going to believe I'm not a narcissist. And he's like, Tyler, I'm an expert here. He's like, I would never diagnose you as a narcissist. He's like, and and you have narcissism in you. Because let's parse this out. A lot of times what we call narcissism in our TikTok culture is really ego. It's ego. It's another word for ego. And when
Absolutely, yes. And it's also a spectrum, like narcissism, as I teach on my channel, it's a spectrum. You can display narcissistic characteristics. That doesn't mean you're like in the polar extreme of being a narcissist with like a personality disorder that's like beyond the scope of repair. You are within the scope of repair if you're willing to do the self-inquiry, if you're willing to go to counseling, if you're willing to do the meditation, if you're willing to do, I think that's the key here, is that because I have had clients ask me, I think I'm narcissistic, I've done some pretty shitty things. And I'm like, well, okay, listen, we're looking at those things now. You're analyzing those things now. You're willing to do the work to rectify those things now, to put together the piece of the puzzle and bring yourself back into unity, where it's like, I no longer need to be the villain or the victim. I can be in between that and understand that I can go either way at any given moment. And as long as I'm in the observer of, oh, wait, I got to reel my victim back in. I'm playing this one up a little too much. Oh, I can reel my villain back in. I'm in through the process of being authentic.
Well, and I would say I resist the term reel them back in. I think for me, I've been on a journey to learn to love the victim and villain within me. So when my victim shows up, it's not reeling the victim in. It's, what are you needing right now? What is it that is missing? Villain, what are you upset over? Where are you feeling betrayed? Where have I betrayed myself? Because we are the worst betrayers of our own self. But I want to say, getting on this narcissism piece for a second, one of the hardest pieces for me, when I started my spiritual journey and got hooked up with a spiritual coach, she said, Tyler, you're an empath. Empaths are more narcissistic sometimes than the people we determine as narcissists, because we absorb energy. Empaths absorb energy. And we do that without any kind of permission. And when we absorb someone else's energy without their permission, and we do it unconsciously, there's a bit of narcissism there. And and one of the biggest things I learned early on was moving from absorbing energy to observing energy, so that I can observe someone else's energy. So if I see someone sad, I can hold them in their sadness without holding their sadness. And that is a very big shift when you're used to codependent relationships, when you're with somebody who doesn't feel sadness, so you feel it for them.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. The transference of emotions, because if one in the relationship is refusing to get in touch with their feelings and feel the feelings, the empath takes it on as their own and says, that's all right, I'll process this for you. And then this like cyclical nature of energetic exchange is in play, and it's a dance that's very toxic for both involved, because the narcissistic individual needs to learn to process their own emotions, and the empath individual needs to stop processing everybody else's and learn what boundaries are, because most empaths were born with no boundaries, and they become too enmeshed in this codependent dance of crazy.
Right. And part of it for me, I have learned and now we're going to bring it all home to the masculine and feminine energy. The masculine says to the feminine, I can hold space for you. I can hold safe space for you to process your emotions. I say this all the time, to the point where it bugs people. How can I support you? How can I support you? You sound like you're really angry right now. How can I support you in your anger? That is hard, because that's not what people are used to hearing. They're wanting
God, no.
You're
You would
wanting
be
me to,
shocked how many people say very strange things to me because I promote feeling your feelings.
right,
And people are very uncomfortable with that whole concept.
right,
It's radical thinking, apparently, is to like start feeling your feelings again. And so when you say to somebody, I can hold space for you, sure, you can be angry. They're like, what? What do you, huh?
right. Go ahead and
It
I
is
will,
triggering.
I will validate your anger till the cows come home. You wanna throw a rock at that person? I understand why you want to do that. But talking about that is going to be much better about, because that's going to release those feelings than actually picking up a rock and throwing. So the valid emotion of wanting to do that, I validate that as long as you don't actually do it, that you respond and not react. And so
Yes,
having the space to respond and feel that feeling, which is valid, but not behaving in a way where your feelings are driving your actions.
absolutely. I think this is what we need to transfer into in our philosophy for everything, especially in mental health as well as medical health, is having more professionals that have this capacity to hold space and hold a safe location for you to have whatever emotion that you want. But the problem is, the biggest fundamental problem is, even those who are trained professionals have yet to meet their own emotions. And you cannot hold space for anyone else unless you've held space for yourself.
Exactly. And again, we as a society, as a culture, have labeled certain emotions good and certain emotions bad. And this gets back to wicked. Anger is wicked. If you feel anger, that is not safe to feel anger. If you feel sadness, that is bad. You shouldn't feel sad. We need to be happy and joy. And if you were healthy, you would feel joy all the time. And you have toxic masculinity, you have toxic positivity. No, sometimes sadness is a valid emotion. In fact, I would argue where I say, and I write about the Torah, freedom and liberation comes from moving from judgment to curiosity. I would argue the message of the Torah is that we are here to experience grief. And the beauty
Absolutely.
of
We are here to experience every emotion. Every single last emotion is valid. One of the things I get most angry about in retrospective, my own personal awakening and my own healing journey over the last 50 years has been that I was pathologized for being depressed, for being abused. Like, of course I was depressed. That makes perfect sense to be depressed when you're being in an abusive situation. No, of course you're going to be depressed, but no, we don't look at the underlying reasons why people are having emotions. We just label the emotions as problematic.
right,
And therefore, here, take these meds so you stop having those emotions.
right. And what we never deal with is the trauma. And that's really what we are dealing with. So I teach and educate. I have a workshop on trauma informed supervision. This idea, and if anybody's familiar with polyvagal theory, um, we so often react out of that sympathetic nerve, this fight or flight. Like, I am not safe. And it goes back to safety. I am not safe. This is triggering my trauma. I don't know what to do about it. And I will never forget the conversation I had with my therapist around PTSD. And he's like, Tyler, I don't like labels like PTSD. He's like, I'm not saying it's not real. PTSD is a real thing. He's like, I just don't understand why people aren't talking about post traumatic growth and post traumatic resilience. He's like, those are much more valuable conversations once we can recognize the trauma and the triggers. How do we create methods and ways and resources to navigate the trauma to where we experience post traumatic growth and post traumatic resilience? Because he's like, that is where the healing comes. That is where, and if we need to take meds to support post traumatic growth and resilience, fantastic. But it has to be purposeful for the purpose of post traumatic growth. Because
I love that.
if we're
I
just
absolutely love that. So that it's working in in collaboration with a program that's going to give you growth, not just here, stop doing that emotion. I absolutely love that, because if you're handed a med without the counseling attached to it or some sort of service attached to it to give you the tools that you need to process through it, then you're not actually doing anything.
Right.
You're just putting a pause, hitting a pause button. Back to Oh, sorry, I just wanted to go back because we started a lot talking about masculine energy and feminine energy and being safe. So, from your perspective, from a cultural whole wide, men are indoctrinated, I think, way more so than women to not feel. Boys shouldn't cry, and certain expressions of emotions are acceptable for men and certain ones aren't. Like if a man like punches somebody, everybody goes, oh, okay, he's just boys being boys. So some emotions get written off as being a no, some get written off as being, nah, oh, well, we're going to let that one slide. But there's this overall regulation of how much a man is allowed to emote. And so, therefore, if you're not allowed to fully emote and experience what it is to be human, how are you supposed to feel safe?
So I would want to push back on that.
Okay.
Because I think as men, we are trained that there are venues for us to emote and feel safe emoting. Football, video games, movies, comic books. If you've ever been to a sporting event, there are men emoting all over the place. There's anger, there's joy, and I think this is what draws men to these sporting events, because they have the freedom to express feelings that they normally don't get to express in their homes. Because what we have learned as men, we can be safe sharing emotions with each other, not with our females, not with our female friends. Because a guy, right, we will, because I learned this growing up, right? You're playing, and we had video games. I had Pong and Atari. You could yell and trash talk and get into fist fights. And the next day we were best buddies again. Because we expressed how we felt and didn't take it personally. Because we experienced that was your feeling. You're entitled to that. We're cool. So men actually, I think, don't get enough credit for learning how to navigate our emotions. The problem is we have also trained women as men to treat us as if we are not self-aware of our emotions or we have a hidden agenda.
Oh my God, you're blowing my brains here. I'm loving this.
Because
in what way have you trained women to expect nothing? I need to hear this.
I'll get a little personal.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm fascinated.
I have great conversation. I have great examples. So I'm single. I go on the dating. I'm in the dating world, and I will start and women will say, "Oh, I want an emotionally available man. I want an emotionally available man. I want a guy who's in touch with his emotions." And it is very predictable that the first time I experience a woman saying something that hurts my feelings, and me saying, "Hey, when you said that, I know you didn't intend it to hurt, but the way that came across and the way it landed, it hurt." The response I get, and like it's a bell curve, and I have friends who are outliers and they can hold space for me and my emotions. The insecurity in a woman that she triggered a man to be hurt emotionally, you have been trained as women, not you, but women have been trained that men don't have emotion. So if you trigger in a man that he's hurt, holy crap, does that mess with your psyche? That you said something that actually hurt a man's feelings. Just if you're watching this as a woman, Just sit with that for just a second. A man tells you, a man who you think doesn't feel, has no self-awareness, and he says to you, what you said yesterday hurt my feelings deeply. How are you going to react to that? I can tell you my experiences has been the judge gets on his bench and we will go back in time and rehash for accuracy the conversation that just went on. Well, I never said that. That's not what I meant. That's not, and it becomes now me, and I had this experience, and we're good friends. We actually teach a course together now, where we were going back and forth over this very thing. And as a man, I understand there comes a point where I have to take a back seat, because at that there's a point in which a woman, and we're generalizing here, right? Where we're having an argument. It serves me better to understand where she's coming from before I try and help her understand where I'm coming from. So we went back and forth, and I said, hey, this is what I'm hearing from you. Am I missing anything in terms of what you're trying to communicate? And she's like, no, I think you got it. I'm like, great. She's like, I'm so glad we were able to figure that out, Tyler. Thank you for listening to me. And in her mind, we were done. And I had to say, could we have some space now to talk about my feelings and emotions? Because I think I just sat here and listened to you talk about yours, and I feel like I did my best to understand where you were coming from. But I'm still feeling hurt. I'm still feeling like you're not hearing me or understanding me. And for me, it is a big trigger when I'm misunderstood. Because as a man, and I think women go through this too, it's not, we don't own the rights on this. My biggest trigger emotionally is when somebody is misunderstanding me. And it crosses a line where I start to believe they're intentionally trying to misunderstand me because of their own insecurities. Because they can't hold space for their reality to be real where they didn't intend. And I recognize this was never your intent to hurt me. And it still hurts. And we just sit with that. And it's hard. It's hard to hold those two things because in a heteronorm, and we're talking heteronormative here, in a heteronormative relationship, a woman isn't used to a man being that aware of his feelings. She's used to telling him what he should think and feel. And when women try to do that to me, I will say, hey, why don't you let me communicate what I'm feeling and thinking instead of you trying to tell me this is what I want? Because I'll have people say, well, you want this. That's not what I want. Well, that's what you're telling me. Like, so you're hearing me communicate to you, this is what I want. That's your reality. Can I share with you where I'm coming from? And I acknowledge I might not be articulating where I'm coming from articulately. It may be me. I have a degree in communications, and there are a lot of chances in communication for there to be breakdown. But at the end of the day, communication is about connection, getting what's in my head and my heart into your head and heart. And that is a reciprocal process. And men aren't used to it being reciprocal. They're used to it going in one direction. Women, and we're general, again, gross generalization. Women are used to it feeling like a reciprocal process, except it's all being driven by them as women. They're the ones pulling it out of them, pulling it out, right? I have to get it out of him. I'm pulling out the emotions and the feelings, and I'm doing this for him. And it gets back to this mother wound, this idea of he's a little boy, he doesn't understand how he's feeling, and if we don't deal with his feelings, he's going to turn into a monster. Because if he doesn't deal with his feelings, anger is going to boil up, and he's going to blow up, and he's going to hurt me and hurt children and hurt whatever, because he's going to get angry, because he is going to start resenting, and because he's not dealing with his feelings.
So really, you're talking about a cultural deep wound in the psyche in knowing that the masculine energy can flip and turn and twist a situation and make us feel unsafe. So the woman's response, unconscious, I think in most places, is to manipulate the situation. And I've always said that where a man can be like dumb, a woman can be manipulative. And that is, in a sense, an unconscious manipulation to always create an environment of like, I'm safe now.
Because there's a reason why women would choose a random bear in the forest over a random dude.
Yes.
And men, I have to work with men all the time, don't understand that. It blows their minds. Why? I don't get it. And because they don't deal with the reality of being rejected, men don't often deal with rejecting somebody and having death threats because they rejected somebody romantic, or having somebody put up on the internet all sorts of bad things about them because they were rejected. They don't understand. They're like, well, that's not me.
Physically attacked or sexually assaulted or
right.
harassed, or like the list goes on.
And I have a background.
So there's a deep wound in the feminine psyche that says men are dangerous.
And for good, but for good reason. Like that, I don't want to minimize that. I work as a sexual assault crisis counselor in California. And when I went through my training to work the crisis line, we would have speakers come in, and I was the only guy in the room because most men don't want to do that work. And there would be speakers who would come in and be actively hostile towards me for being in that room. And my boss would have to say to them, stop. Tyler is here because he sees he has the opportunity to make a change with other men. He is not here to get the inside track so that he can sexually assault people, which was what.
Oh no, you're frozen. Oh, we've lost Tyler. This is so sad. I don't know if he's going to pop in back into us. We'll give him a minute. As we're waiting to see if Tyler can get himself back in, which this is sad because this is such a fascinating conversation. If anybody has any questions or comments that they want to throw in the chat, I have Airflow saying this is awesome, appreciating this one, which is fantastic. Yay. I also have Outdoors with Woodswoman, hi, B, and Tyler, and hello to you, darling. So I'm holding on, hoping that Tyler can unfreeze his situation. And I'm really happy. Yes, we've completely lost him now. So hopefully he'll rejoin. This is a fascinating conversation, one that we need to be having more and more of out there in societies, because we need to break these paradigms and these extremes. I'm loving how Tyler talked one thing about both things being true. And so I want to just focus on that for a moment and say, and here he is, he's coming back in. Welcome back, Tyler. I'm just reiterating what you were talking about in regards to both things being true at the same time. So you can have, and this is one of the things that I think is going to bring us in to reconciliation between the masculine and the feminine energy is understanding there can be two truths at the same time. Welcome back, Tyler. I was just filling space as we lost you there. I was explaining that you had mentioned the two truths being, you're going to have two truths that are both being right. So tell us more from your perspective how we as a culture, both the masculines and the feminines, can start transmuting these wounds.
I think it's recognizing, and I'm going to try and get on from my computer again because it's a little awkward here, but
your sound quality is actually better on this. So.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'll hold it. So I think what we have to do is get away from the binary. The two truths that we need to hold within us is that we have these masculine and feminine energies within us. So I like to use my hands. So let me try this. See if
Yes.
I can get this to stand up for a second. All right, let's see if this works. So
Perfect.
within me, the way I like and how I go about the world is the feminine energy is like an ocean. The feminine energy is freedom. It's setting sail and creating space for a boat to go wherever it wants. So I go about the world holding my feminine energies out for people to feel safe. I'm home. If you want to come sail on the ocean, come sail on the ocean. But that ocean is freedom for you, but it's backed with this masculine strength. And when the storm comes, I can shift into my masculine strength and anchor backed with my feminine freedom and tenderness. And then when the storm passes, I go back into my feminine backed with masculine. And it's shifting because they're not feminine, masculine. You cannot take them apart from each other. They are connected energetically. And I talk about kinetic and potential energy. When I am kinetically in my feminine energy, I am building up masculine potential energy. When I am in my masculine kinetic energy, I'm building up feminine potential energy. Did I say that right? So when I'm in my masculine kinetic, the feminine potential is building up. And when there's a balance and a flow, which we get into the moon cycles, it's all about a flow, it works. The problem becomes when we're out of balance and we're out of harmony. Too much masculine energy, because I don't feel safe, can create this store up of feminine energy behind me that needs to be released somehow. And it has to come out because energy cannot be contained because of entropy, because it will start leaking out and create chaos. But when you can shift, you will find beauty. You will find incredible beauty.
So how do we get this information out to the mass? Or like where do men go? Like women have had environments for 30, 40 years, Oprah and everybody talking about their emotion, women's talking circles and this and that. Do you see a shift already occurring where more men are able to go to men's talking circles and go to men's groups where they can start to learn how to utilize their feminine energy, being in a more expressive, authentic state? What is your perspective?
I have bad news.
Oh, dear.
I don't think most men want to do this work. I think there's not a lot of incentive for them to do this work because the society is built for them not to do this work. The society, this is the system. The patriarchy is designed. What incentive is there to do this work?
Sex.
So I don't know if this is a PG related.
Well, no, I have my settings on for no children, but the reason why I say sex is because what I have noticed, so what I've noticed in the last 5 years, particularly since the Great Awakening kind of has begun, because 2019-20 is when a lot of people, the second wave started to wake up. And what I noticed was a lot of marriages breaking up. A lot of women who stepped into their masculine energy for a change and said, I'm not tolerating this bullshit anymore. I'm fucking out the door, and took off, leaving men to go, hey, wait a second, where'd all the good girls go? Where'd all the women go? And all these women are saying, I don't want a man. I don't need a man. I'm happy with my cat. I'm not putting up with this bullshit anymore. So then there's which has created a void, a vacuum for men to be single and to be sitting on their own going, okay, well, now what I do? If they're not going to date me as I am, I'm going to be forced to change. So that
is a very interesting perspective. And as a man, the way you tell that doesn't align with the reality I see for most of my people, men.
Interesting.
Because what I have seen from men is, wait, I can have as much sex as I want without any kind of responsibility to my wife. Sign me up. Sign me up.
Interesting. So you
I
think
don't.
it's still a plethora available to them so that they have no motivation?
Yes. And let me give you, because women ask all the time, why do men send dick pics?
Yeah. Why?
Because it's effective. And let me
Annoyingness?
let me explain. Let me explain, because I think this blows a lot of women's minds. For me in the dating world, so if you go onto an app, men match about 1 to 3% of the time. So if I swipe right, out of 100 women, 1 to 3 will swipe right on me. For women, it's 40 to 60%. If they swipe right, there's a 40 to 60% chance the man will swipe right. And there's data to back this. For me, I would spend an amount of time getting to know a woman, right? I spend a lot of time, a lot of energy. There are studies, and there was a famous Redditor who basically tracked, and he would send a dick pic. He had it down to, he would send 100 dick pics a week. And when the weekend rolled around, he had 1 to 3 women at his beck and call for that weekend. And this was in a major city. So if you think about it from a time perspective, if what you want is sex and it takes you 2 minutes to send a dick pic, so to send 20 dick pics, that's 40 minutes of your life. 40 minutes over the course of 5 days, we're talking 200 minutes of your life. That's a pretty good return on investment if that's what you're looking for. Now, you and a lot of women would be like, that grosses me out. Why would any woman do that? Because there are women who do that. And that, I think, is what we don't understand, is it's a bell curve. And the dick pic guys are going for the outlier, because they know if they go a shotgun approach and they send 100 dick pics, they're going to get 1 to 3 hits back.
So you basically are saying that for as much as there are women out there that is going to provide them with what they need, there is zero motivation whatsoever for men to change.
Well, I wouldn't say zero, because really this isn't about, so the work for the man isn't about getting a woman. It's not about a romantic relationship, because at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to motivate a man is the desire to heal his mother wound. That's it. Because at the end of the day, this is all the mother wound playing itself out.
And what triggers that?
That's a good question. I don't think a woman is going to trigger that in a man. I don't know. I could be wrong on that. I think there are a lot of women out there who want to be the inspiration, the catalyst, the muse that encourages a man to discover his heart, right? There's something romantic about being a woman, and I can feel this, to be the person in a man's life that inspires him to do the spiritual work.
Oh, 100%. But that's even like shown in movies, if he loved me enough, then he's going to want to change, because you always see this bad boy in the movies, and then he falls in love with the woman and he's like, oh, but for you, honey, I'm going to make a whole bunch of different changes in my life. So it's indoctrinated into women that, even fairy tales, like one of the fairy tales that drives me absolutely insane is Snow White, because the guy she falls in love with was a hunter that was hired to murder her. And he fell madly in love with her and went from being the villain into this like, I'm going to save you now, the hero of the story. So we are indoctrinated as women to believe that our love is going to be what's going to change them.
So my advice to women, because I coach them all the time, is if you really want to fix the problem, protect your womb at all costs. Because you can't protect the wombs of other women. And to me, if a guy hasn't healed his mother wound, that might be the gateway for you not to let him into your womb. Just say it. That really is the only work you can do as a woman is on yourself. You can place the boundary. And so women will be like, well, how do I know? I'm like, I could save you a lot of time. On the first date, your first question should be, how have you healed the mother wound? And what work are you currently doing on that? And women look at me like I'm crazy. There's no way a guy would run for the hills. You're right. He would. That's what you want to discover from the very beginning. If what you want is a spiritually gifted man who is doing the work, his only response to that would be, wow, you care about healing my mother wound? I care about healing my mother wound. Let me tell you what I've been doing. I've been going to therapy. I've been journaling. I've been getting in touch with my feminine energy. If that was the answer on the first date, bam, you know. But the
I think
issue
that's
is,
amazing. I don't know. I don't date. But if I did date, or if somebody like came into my like direct messaging, I would use that line in a heartbeat to get them to run away. Please
right,
run away. That's
right.
exactly the direction that I would want them to go. If somebody had the balls to actually answer that question, I would actually consider dating them. Otherwise,
You would be, and you would be surprised, because my go-to question on the dating apps when I match is, so tell me about something you've learned about yourself over the last year. That's my first question on the app. You would be surprised how many women get mad at me for starting the conversation with that question. Well, that's a little personal, don't you think? And right away I know, yeah, we're not going to be aligned. Because if that question bothers you,
it saves time to know right away. Absolutely. Why waste a month or this or that? Why? Because women think, I can change him.
yes, I'm always a cards on the table kind of person, because for me, I don't want to waste your time and I don't want to waste mine. So I will put all of my cards, like, here's who I am, here's where I'm at today. Do I know where I'm going to be a year from now? No. Because if you told me a year ago this is where I would be, no. But what I can tell you is I am going to therapy. I am aware of my mother wound. I am aware of the neglect. I am aware when I'm triggered. And when I'm not aware, if you tell me you think I'm triggered, I'm going to receive that and reflect and contemplate and do my work. Because at the end of the day, that's all I can do. I don't know where I'm going to be a year from now. But so many of us want to skirt around. And the other reason women don't do this is because it's also not safe for women to always do this. Let's be real. If you ask a guy, how are you healing your mother wound? You're throwing the dice on the ground and hoping a one doesn't come up, because he could react violently to a question like that. And I want to validate and acknowledge, for women, asking that question also isn't as safe. And I have privilege as a man, because I'm going to ask that question and I know I'm going to be relatively safe asking a question like that.
So bringing back to kind of the theme where we started from, because we were talking about awakenings. This whole thing is about awakening. Do you think that the awakening will be the catalyst for more men to identify their mother wound and heal their mother wound? Was that what it was for you that said, okay, wait a second, I actually need to do the work here?
It's a good question. I believe so. Let me go back to me. I became aware of the depth of my wound when a good friend of mine from my Quaker boarding school took me, because I asked her to my parents' gravesite. And she got me started on crystals. So she had selenite on her. And she was saying, hey, Tyler, I feel the energy between you and your dad is good, but there's a lot of stuff happening between you and your mom. Because I was willing to go to my parents' gravesite, and this was the first time in 33 years that I'd been back, I will never forget the moment of sitting there going, I really wish I could have a hug right now. And I realized I had built my entire life around never needing a hug from anyone. And I knew I wanted a hug, but I also knew I didn't want to ask my friend, her name was Sarah. I didn't want to ask Sarah for a hug because there was something about it that just felt wrong. And there was this gush of wind that came through. And Sarah said, do you need a hug? Without me saying a word. And I just said, yes. And she held me and I sobbed. I sobbed. And that broke through my mother wound.
I love that. The power of a hug can be life-changing. I've had two of those hugs in my life that were just, they can change a life.
But she didn't control that. She wasn't trying to get me to look at my mother wound. It was the universe acting on my behalf, I think, and I've got to reflect on if this is my ego or if this is myself, because I was open to it. Because I was open to it. At the end of the day, I cannot. So I say this all the time to my clients. I do Reiki. I'm a Reiki Master Practitioner, but I'm very careful to say I am not a healer because I cannot heal. I can translate. I can give you information for you to do your own healing, but I cannot heal you. I am a conduit. So honestly, I think we have to back off. So let me say so you want to stop the dick pics, what I tell women all the time, save them. And the next time a guy sends you a dick pic, send him one back. And say, oh, that's nice. Are we trading dick pics? Here's mine. Because I guarantee you, he's going to think twice next time doing it because he didn't expect that to happen. And it's going to throw him off a little bit because he's doing it from a place of power, expecting you to get mad at him and angry or block him or ignore him. He's not expecting the engagement. That's what you could do. Send them dick pics back, collect them like trading cards. Because that'll incentivize him to stop.
My approach. I go for the blocks. It's how I go.
And again, that's totally appropriate. I'm just, if people are like, how do we make it stop? Blocking it is just, again, for a man who is in that space, and maybe those men aren't ready. Maybe they're more ready than the rest of the men who are living comfortable lives with women who will sleep with them. And you want to talk manipulation, they know the right thing to say and the right thing not to say to have access to the womb.
So let's take this into a more positive direction and say, if you are a man and you're realizing from watching this video right here, right now, today, hey, wait a second, I think I have mother wounds that I haven't dealt with. What would you recommend to those men? What would their next steps be? What do you suggest?
Therapy. And
any particular type of therapy?
No, because it's different, but I would explain the different types because as a man, I didn't understand that at first. And I will never forget the therapist who told me, I met with her and I had some wounding from therapists from when my father died because I had a therapist betray me. Because like my therapist, when I was 15, was all about bringing my mom into therapy and I didn't want her to come into therapy. And he brought her in and betrayed me and took her side. And I never wanted to go back to therapy again. So when I went to therapy when I was 20 and I had suicide ideations, I should have probably warned people on that. The therapist said to me something that I'll never forget. She's like, Tyler, I work for you. You're my boss. You're not here to tell me what you think I want to hear. You're not here to try and have me figure you out and tell you you're a good person. I am here. You are my boss. I'm here to help you. You do with that what you want. If you don't like it or you're feeling dissatisfied, fire me and find someone else, because there's multiple types of therapy. I did CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. That got me from my heart attack to my move to Oneonta. When I came to Oneonta, I was very fortunate, and I found somebody who did problem solution based therapy. So he gives me tools. So I've learned brain spotting, which is a beautiful tool that rewires the brain through light and sound. That there is a spot when we are thinking, or we're in crisis, or we're in stress, our eyes tend to go to a certain place, and he helps rewire that. So he taught me brain spotting. He taught me heart math. He taught me these coping skills to get to a place of emotional regulation, which at the end of the day, for a man, is really what we're talking about, is how do we navigate our emotions in a way where it is safe?
Yes, so emotion-based therapy would be a useful therapy, as well as you just said, say it again, problem
solution-based oriented therapy. I know people who have been successful in DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy.
Yes, I've had that as well.
I know. And so again, I think at different points of your healing journey, those different therapies could help. So I think it's helping us educate people on what therapy is and what it's not. Because I think there's a lot of stigma. I think there's a lot of struggle. And I will say, I was diagnosed with agitated depression, and I was prescribed medication, but my therapist had me watch a video so I would understand what the medication was doing to my brain, because he wanted me to be aware of what the process was, because the goal was to get off the meds. The goal was the meds were helping move me in a place where
they were temporary measure to get you to more grounding. I wish there was more counselors out there that did that kind of thing for people. So yes, thank you for sharing that.
So to me, therapy is the answer. It is the beginning. It is the genesis for the work. Because if you're not in therapy and you're trying to do this on your own, you're still living out the mother wound that says you have to toughen up. You have to do it all on your own. There's no support. There's no nurturing. There's nothing for you.
Yes. I would add, just to anybody who's watching, is make sure that you're interviewing your therapist. Just because you get an appointment with somebody doesn't mean you have to stay with them. A good therapist is like a spouse. It takes time to find a good fit. Don't feel bad if it's not a good fit and saying, yeah, I don't think this is going to work for me. Go to a first session and see if it's a good feeling. If it's not a good feeling, do something else. I'm going to also throw out that my personal favorite form of therapy is somatic-based counseling.
I love somatic-based counseling. Yes, for sure.
Especially because I think if you've been in the energy that you've been talking about, where you're very good at presenting a facade, inside you feel dark and dirty, but your character is Mr. Nice Guy, then you know how to talk to people. And so going to a somatic-based counselor is going to be much more effective because it's less about what you're saying and more about what your body is involuntarily doing, which you can't hide. Mm-hmm. So the facade comes down because you're displaying agitation in certain lines of questioning, and then they can probe. Okay, I see your hands doing this while you're talking. Let's go into this. What's going on? Let's sit with that. Let's feel that. And they can get past that facade, because otherwise counseling can be a major waste of your time. Because if you go into counseling and you're just telling them what you think they want to hear, you're not doing the work.
And I want to say a few more things about counseling because of the stigma and because it's a privilege. Because I live in an area where there isn't a lot of counseling available. A lot of the providers either don't, the ones who take my insurance aren't taking new patients, or the ones who are taking my insurance are full. I had to go to the clinic in town, the county mental health clinic, to find my therapist. That's where my search brought me. And there was some humbling with that, right? Like there's some ego, like, why would I go to the county clinic? Like that's where like the drug abusers go. And and I had to get through that to find this gem of a therapist. And he is a licensed clinical social worker. Don't discount Zoom therapy. So my first therapy session was a week before COVID hit. That was my first March 14th, 2020 was my first session, because then COVID hit and we shifted to Zoom. And I did Zoom therapy for a good 8 months before I went back into his office. And he was able to do things over Zoom. And I think a lot of people are like, I don't want Zoom therapy. I want to be in person. Yes, that's great. But that also might be a privilege in your area. Where you live, you may be in a therapist desert. There may not be a CBT available. There may not be a somatic therapist in your area. And we have to recognize that is an issue, because we don't have enough therapists. We don't have enough clinicians to handle the mental health trauma crisis this country is facing. And I'm speaking as an American. This is a global pandemic. You want to talk about a global pandemic? The mental health crisis internationally, globally, there are not enough providers. So be open to, be curious about, and be aware of what your goal is in therapy. Why are you in therapy? What are you wanting to get out of it? And are you going for yourself, or are you going so that your relationship is peaceful?
Yes, that's good. I too, my therapist I lucked into because I went to victim services when I reported my ex to the police. And I couldn't have found somebody better. I'm very, very lucky, but she also is on Zoom. So I definitely wouldn't discount Zoom as an option to be able to get the type of help that you need, whatever type of help it is. There's so many different types of people out there that can assist you, ranging from life coaches and spiritual advisors and counselors, social workers, psychologists, psychotherapists, and psychiatrists, So depending on what scope you're looking for, identifying what it is that you're seeking, Psych Today is a very good starting place.
Right.
Is do a search on Psych Today, and they'll list out what's available in your community if you're looking for somebody. Any other final thoughts that you want to give us, as we've gone way past my normal hour, but I just couldn't stop it. It was too juicy.
I love these conversations. I love kind of the co-creation of healing. And I got done saying, like, I'm not a healer, and yet I think the space creator is a catalyst for healing. It's an opportunity for people to do their work. And I'm reflecting on whether that comes from a place of ego, but I think at the end of the day, the biggest wound is the wound we do to ourselves. When we are looking at how somebody betrays us, when we look at our abandonment wounds, we have betrayed and abandoned and rejected ourselves far worse than anyone else around us. And that's where the work has to start. Is, as a man, we play the victim villain mentality a little different, because we come in as the hero, right? We don't see ourselves as victims. We don't see ourselves as villains. We want to be the hero. The woman is the victim. Her ex is the villain. And I'm the hero. That's the triad. That's the story. That's the Hallmark movie. We have to let go and be our own hero, because we can choose to be the hero of our own story and allow someone else to write us as the villain of their story. And that is a hard line to hold, because I desperately, to this day, my divorce finalized 6 months ago. There is still a part of me that wants to convince my ex that I'm a good dad, that I was a good husband, and that is a wounded part of me that goes back to wanting to convince my mother I was safe, I'm a good boy, I am not going to be a villain. That will always be there. And so how do we hold space to be tender to that part of ourselves and not project that crap onto other people?
That's excellent. Thank you for that. Tyler, if people want to work with you, how do people get in touch with you so that they can work with you? And do you have services available via Zoom, or do you just work in person?
I do it all. So my website is tikkunolum47.com. So TIKKUNOLAM47.com. So Tikkun Olam is the Jewish concept of heal the world, repair the world. And so they can go to my website. I post commentary on the Torah every day. It is very heavy. Though this year I've kind of been a little lighter. I've tried to lighten it up a little bit and not dig as deep, but it can get very heavy. I can do Reiki remotely. I work with clients from around the world because energy is not bound by space and time. So I can do Reiki remotely. I do dream interpretation. I do spiritual coaching. I can do that over Zoom. I got a new job, so kind of like my class work, my online classes have kind of slowed down. But if there was enough interest, I would reopen that again. I do have a sliding scale. I do not want finances to be the reason somebody can't work with me. So for me, I'm very open, and I always provide a free consult to kind of have a conversation and to put together what something could look like, because everybody's different and they have a different plan. But yeah, so I do a lot of different things. I can help with relationship advice. Not that I can model it, but I can just tell you from experience, and I can ask questions. I don't give answers. I just ask curious questions and provide contemplation. I work with frameworks. I can work with the gene keys if people are familiar with gene keys. I work with Kabbalah. I work with Reiki. I have a lot of different frameworks and languages. I have a background. I planted a church, so I'm familiar with evangelical Christianity. I'm familiar with Catholicism, and I consider myself a translator to be able to speak the language when somebody comes to me that resonates for them. So
that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that with us. So I'll be sure to get his website and put it in the description so that if any of you out there, even some of those men that might be watching and are looking for somebody to help walk them through their mother wound, I think Tyler is your man to assist you with that. He's done his own work, and experience is always, in my opinion, 8 times more valuable than just book learnings. So I'm going to say thank you very, very much for joining us today, Tyler. I really appreciate this interview. It's gone way into the longer ebb, but we're so appreciative. Before you leave, I just wanted to share with you one of the comments that we received, which is, I am very grateful to Tyler and you. Well, that's good. Much appreciated to hear a Jewish man who deeply studied and integrates for its committed integrates or is a committed to doing the work to integrate the shadow resonates much. So that's a very nice feedback for you already. If you out there, and I want to hear from you guys, not just you women. We've had a lot of women, so maybe this will motivate more of you guys out there to come on to UTalk to share with us your story of healing and growth through your own personal awakening here on the U Movement. Get in touch with me via my email, which will be also in the description below, or you can send me a message on Messenger. That all said, everybody, I'm going to say